Next section are the asteroidia. So here we go. This neat little 3D animation of an asteroid, and it also shows you how the how all the little plates. So though, like in a brittle star, there are going to be lots of little tiny bones, each their own different shape, inside of a starfish, and each one of those is going to be hooked up with tiny muscles. So again, the A and P analogy. If you thought memorizing all the muscles in a human body was a pain in the butt, just be glad that we are not born starfish, because there would be so many more. And it also talks about, I believe, the way that the muscles can lock into place for feeding. So shown here, the ambulacral groove. You've got pictures of nice close-ups of starfish. I think one's on a beach and one might be in an aquarium. And you can see those actual tube feet coming out and being inflated and moved around, because remember, there are muscles on either side of it. So you can inflate it and you can kind of rotate it, and it's got that little suction cup where it'll grab onto something at the end with a slight change in the inflation pressure of the tube foot. Then we've got the pedicelaria on the surface of a starfish. Pedicelaria on an echinoid, so that's actually out of the section, but since we're talking pedicelaria, let's look at them both together. Tube feet for walking around on land. Starfish politeness? Definitely not. Yeah, this is starfish that would once again tear each other limb from limb, and they're avoiding each other because they don't want to become food for another starfish, basically. So if they run into each other, they're going to have... starfish have clustered photoreceptors at the ends of every tentacle on a lot of different kinds. And so think of eyes at the tips of each of their arms. Sometimes there's even a little black spot you can see on there, which would indicate where the eye is. Here are starfish eating, and I think this is the one that I just think is the most wonderful, up on the Antarctic shelf where they're ripping apart the dead sea lion. It's fantastic. You got to see it. I think we looked at it a little bit at the beginning of class, but it is worth another watch. Just, yeah. Sit down with a glass of your favorite beverage and enjoy. Starfish scavenging, fantastic. This is what they do. Starfish hunting, of course they hunt. Yeah, they are also vicious little hunters. They swarm over things and just rip them apart. And of course, they can lock down in that rigid muscle way. And what they would do in order to eat is they will generally squeeze their stomachs out. So they have a stomach that can actually be squeezed out through the mouth opening, and the stomach will then dissolve whatever it is in place. So even if it's something hard that has a shell, for example, the stomach's just going to pull that in and dissolve it. And then the teeth are going to be there, but they're not as sharp and bitey, if you like, as the ones we saw on the brittle stars. Although, of course, there are different kinds of each one of these groups, and so it's hard to completely generalize. This is another one from the same video up in the Antarctic, or down in the Antarctic, I guess, talking about a thing called a Brine Achill, which is where you get this little frozen salt water, and it actually goes down there. And you can see some of these starfish trying to escape, but many starfish die. So if you felt a little bad for the sea lion, this is kind of the Arctic's revenge. This is a really cool one. There is one group of starfish, and they can actually reproduce by dividing. Essentially, you rip these things in half, or some fish does, and both halves will regrow, and they can even rip themselves in half in order to grow two individuals from one. So that's pretty neat. That's not something that happens in every other group. And remember, they have a ring-shaped brain. So when they are ripping themselves in half the brain goes one way and half goes the other. And yet they're able to regrow the rest of the brain. And it turns out that with a lot of starfish, as long as you retain at least some of that central disc, which has the brain and an intact part of the water vascular system, that is going to be enough to regrow the rest of the starfish from broken up little limbs. So very interesting. And these are some deep sea starfish down in here, because anything down in the deep ocean is going to be really unfamiliar and usually quite interesting looking. So let's go on with the PowerPoint and start off the subtitles. Here we go. Here are some starfish in the group Asteroidia. And so, Asterias amurensis, there we are. And this is the madreporite. So the madreporite, remember, is a place where the water vascular system can exchange some of that waste and get rid of it to the ocean. So this is going to do the job effectively of the kidneys, although there are other waste excretion mechanisms. Starfish do have an anus, and any sort of solid waste and other kinds of waste they can actually push out that way. So this is just for cleaning out that water vascular system, as far as I'm aware. And so you will have a madreporite. It's generally going to be somewhere on the top of the starfish, but shifted off to the side. And again, remember, this is twofold symmetry, so our axis of symmetry will be running right here through the madreporite. And they don't have 5 madreporites, they only have 1. If you were to look inside a starfish arm, there's a little bit of gonad here, but that's going to expand to a big blob of gonad that's going to fill up most of the arm most of the time if you see a bunch of individuals and you were to dissect one. The little ossicles are the little mini bones, little bonelets, if you like. And in between these guys, there's going to be little muscles that connect them, so it can bend and flex its arms. It's going to have here papula, which are a modified version of a tube foot. And those are going to be feelers on the top side, if you like. And on the bottom, you're going to have your actual little tube feet. Again, there's going to be the ampulla, that little bulb at the top where we can squeeze out the water to inflate the tube foot, or we can relax and allow the water to go back up in here to contract the tube foot. Then the radial nerve cord would run down here. They're going to be, there's a ring in the brain, and there's one major neuron bundle, rather, that's going to run down each of the arms, and that's what's going to control each of the sets of tube feet, for example. And control all the other muscles that are in there. This is only part of it. So here we're showing the gonads at more or less their full extent. And so, yeah, the arms are basically full of gonads. The center, this is the... So there are 2 parts. There's called a cardiac stomach and a pyloric stomach. And yeah, I believe it is the cardiac stomach that is actually going to be squeezed out through the mouth in some species to do some digesting there. And then the digestive tracts are going to run along each of the arms just like that. And so, yeah, and then down here's our little water vascular system, and there's our little ampullas that are going to operate each of the tube feet, and each tube foot is going to have its own one. So here is a starfish, and you can see this one is actually detaching some of its own arms. This is one of the things that happens in a certain kind of starfish disease. There's at least one viral disease where the starfish will deliberately detach their own arms. And there may be other reasons why they would want to do this. That's just one of the ones that is documented. But if a predator were to come along and bite a starfish arm, it can lose that arm. It can even lose a chunk of its brain, and the starfish will regrow all of that. They are, once again, very good at regeneration. What you find as you go down the animal tree is that most other kinds of animals are actually quite good at regeneration. We think that part of that is to do with the way that they keep it simple. So as you go through more and more developmental stages, it gets more and more difficult to actually regenerate the latest version of the part. And there isn't really a way to go through all of the metamorphosis in just one body part. You kind of have to go through the whole thing. That's one explanation. There's another explanation that there's a kind of a grid of signals. And we have it in babies and in animals that regenerate that sort of tell you which part to regenerate. But for whatever reason, we've lost that in adult humans. And so they would say that if we were able to reestablish that grid of signals, then theoretically you could grow back an ear or an arm or whatever you need. But who knows? That's an area for more further work. These are going to be the tube feet, and the tube feet can pinch together to move along a substrate or move something in toward the mouth. And they can rotate and they can move sideways as well. And so, yeah, they're very good at feeding in food in toward the mouth and also for walking. So when a starfish, an asteroid, is moving, its mouth is going to be pointed down for the most part, and it's going to have an armored face appearing on the top. And so starfish are armoring the part where predators are going to come from, and they're keeping their tube feet out and flexible on the part where they're going to need to be passing food along to the mouth or latching onto prey, for example. This is a relative of starfish, and as you can see in here, it's similar to starfish, but instead of tube feet, it's going to have these little marginal spines, which are going to operate in a similar way to how the tube feet would work. And yeah, this is just another member of a very similar group. For a time, these were considered a fifth class of starfish, I think, or rather, a fifth class of echinoderms. There we go. I think now they have been put back in based on genetic evidence and are considered part of the asteroids once again. But they're an interesting group. They don't really have arms. It's just like a disc with all these little radiating marginal spines around the edge. But you can see there is still the evidence of fivefold symmetry, and they do have those ambulacral grooves they're going to run under the bottom. So it's like the center of a brittle star or the center of a starfish, really. Okay, and that's going to be it for the section on starfish.